Imagine, for a second, eating your lunch like this.
Okay.
Instead of chewing, you just violently throw up your stomach acid all over a cheeseburger that's just sitting on your kitchen counter.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a visual.
Right. You step back, you wait a few minutes for the meat, the bread, the cheese, everything to just melt into this bubbling gray puddle of nutrient soup.
Delicious.
And then you drink that puddle through a microscopic coffee filter.
Right.
And when the filter gets clogged with, say, I don't know, an undigested sesame seed, you just reverse the flow. You pump the acid backward and pop out this dry little pellet of waste.
It is a brilliantly disgusting mechanism. I mean, it really sounds like something out of a deep space horror movie.
It totally does.
Yeah.
But if you're a spider, that is literally just Tuesday.
Yeah, and it really forces us to confront our own mammalian biases, you know?
How so?
Well, we look at a dog or a bird or even like a fish, and we fundamentally understand how they operate.
Right, they have parts we recognize.
Exactly. They have a mouth that chews, lungs that heave, a heart that pumps blood in a closed loop. But spiders, they operate on a set of engineering principles that seem almost alien.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are exploring the real biological reality of spiders. And we're guided by this incredibly comprehensive breakdown of their anatomy, behavior, and evolution.
Yeah, specifically pulling from Rainer F. Felix's foundational textbook, Biology of Spiders.
And there's this one amazing visual contrast early on in the research that just completely captures our historical relationship with these animals.
The woodcut, right?
Yes, we have this medieval woodcut from Germany printed in 1491.
The Hortus Sanitatis.
Right. And the drawing is just hilarious. The artist clearly was terrified and completely refused to look closely at a real spider.
They just guess.
Totally guessed. They drew this weird, bumpy, anthropomorphic blob with a scary, cartoonish human face.
It's so strange.
Literally, the only anatomically correct thing about the drawing is that it happens to have 8 legs. Everything else is just pure nightmare fuel based on ignorance.
And it perfectly illustrates how fear distorts perception, you know? When you are terrified of something, you don't study its mechanics. You caricature its threat.
Right.
That 1491 woodcut is essentially a drawing of human anxiety, not a biological organism.
But then the research contrasts that European woodcut with a Japanese silk painting from the 1800s by an artist named Oid Makoto.
Ah, yeah.
And the tone couldn't be more different. Shows a cat crouched in the grass, intensely studying a highly detailed, anatomically perfect spider.
Which is a very different vibe.
Completely different.
Yeah.
The cat isn't disgusted, isn't running away. It's just utterly absorbed in quiet observation.
And it's just curious.
Exactly. And that feline curiosity is exactly what we are asking you, the listener, to adopt today.
Yeah, we really want you to lean into that.
We are going to deconstruct the spider. We're going to look at the nuts and bolts of their physical engine, how they process fuel, how they build their world, and eventually trace this massive plot twist in their family tree.
It's a necessary perspective shift, honestly, because this blueprint is arguably one of the most successful designs in planetary history.
Oh, without a doubt.
Spiders have conquered basically every terrestrial ecological niche. I mean, you will find them hunting in the salt spray of tidal zones, freezing on the slopes of Mount Everest.
Wait, Mount Everest? Really?
Oh yeah, jumping spiders up there, surviving absolute deserts, and thriving in the canopy of lush rainforests. The core design is so incredibly robust that it hasn't needed a major overhaul in hundreds of millions of years.
So let's look under the hood of that design. If we strip away the silk and the venom for a moment and just look at the chassis, a spider is essentially a 2-part machine.
Right.
They have a very strict, almost modular division of labor in their bodies.
That's a really good way to describe it. The entire body is cleaved into 2 distinct halves. The front half is the prosoma, which scientists also call the cephalothorax.
Which literally means head-chest.
Exactly, head-chest. And the back half is the opistosoma, which we just commonly call the abdomen.
Right.
And connecting these 2 massive sections is a structurally vital, incredibly narrow stalk called the pedicel.
Trying to visualize this. And the closest human-made machine I could think of is like an 18-wheeler tractor trailer.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, like the front half, the prosoma, is the cab of the truck. It has the engine, the steering, the cameras, the eyes, the brain, the mouth. And all the wheels, or in this case, all 8 legs, are attached to it.
Right, it handles all the sensory input and the locomotion.
And then the back half, the abdomen, is the trailer. It hauls all the cargo. It handles the vegetative tasks like digesting the food, breathing, making eggs, and housing the silk manufacturing plant.
Yeah, it's the logistics hub.
But frankly, having all of your vital life support systems dragging behind you on a tiny little trailer hitch seems like a massive structural vulnerability. I mean, why not just fuse it all into one solid body like a beetle?
Because a beetle's design really limits its flexibility, particularly regarding reproduction and food storage. The spider's division of labor actually solves a fundamental physics problem.
How so?
Well, the front half that cab of the truck needs to be an absolutely rigid armored platform. Think about the mechanical forces at play here.
Okay.
You have 8 highly articulated legs pushing and pulling against the ground, and you have fangs actively wrestling, struggling, sometimes heavily armored prey.
So there's a lot of torque.
Huge amounts of torque. If the body segment anchoring all those moving parts was soft, it would warp, buckle, or just tear under the mechanical stress.
Yeah, I guess you can't mount a heavy-duty crane onto a mattress.
Exactly, you need a steel chassis. That is why the prosoma is encased in a hard dorsal plate on top, called the carapace, and a solid ventral plate on the bottom, the sternum.
So it's basically a rigid box.
It is a rigid box, but here is the biological trade-off. If your entire body is a rigid box, you can't expand.
Oh, right, because the shell doesn't stretch.
Exactly. You are severely limited in how much food you can eat at one time and how many eggs you can produce. By isolating all those vegetative organs in the back half, the spider's abdomen can remain soft and sac-like.
It can stretch out.
It can massively expand. I mean, a female spider can produce a clutch of hundreds of eggs, swelling her abdomen to 3 or 4 times its normal size without ever warping the rigid front half that she needs to hunt and defend herself.
That makes total sense. And that little connecting stalk, the pedicel, why is it so narrow?
The pedicel is the genius of the design, really. By placing the abdomen on a highly articulated swivel, the spider can independently aim its back half.
Oh, like aiming the spinnerets.
Yes. When a spider is weaving a complex orb web, it needs to precisely tap its spinnerets against specific anchor points, sometimes reaching completely around its own body. A fused beetle-like body couldn't do that.
Okay, so we have this modular articulating chassis, but moving it requires muscle. And here is where my preconceived notions were totally shattered by the source material.
Oh, about their speed.
Yeah. We think of spiders as these relentless, fast-moving terrors that chase you across the floor. But biologically, they're terrible runners.
They really are.
They are like the drag racers of the animal kingdom,
Yeah.
built entirely for sprinting, but physically incapable of running a marathon.
It comes down to cellular metabolism and a very profound evolutionary trade-off. To sustain long periods of exercise, like a wolf chasing a deer or a human running a 5K muscle tissue, requires high concentrations of mitochondria.
The powerhouse of the cell.
Right, exactly. Mitochondria use oxygen to burn fuel efficiently. That's aerobic respiration. Spiders, however, have very few mitochondria in their muscle cells.
Why? Is it just to save space?
Mostly it's to save weight and energy during their long periods of inactivity. But the consequence is that when a spider does move fast, it can't rely on oxygen to power its muscles. It has to use anaerobic energy sources.
Which means burning fuel without oxygen,
Yes. It immediately burns through stored cellular phosphates and glycogen.
which gives them that explosive, teleporting speed. You blink and the spider's 3 feet away.
Yeah, they are incredibly fast off the line, but the biochemical cost of that explosion is severe.
What happened?
Well, when muscles burn glycogen without oxygen, the chemical byproduct is lactic acid, specifically a form called D-lactate. In a spider, this acid builds up in the muscle tissue incredibly fast.
Faster than in us.
Much faster. And then it rapidly spills over into their hemolymph, which is the spider equivalent of blood. This sudden influx of acid causes the pH level of their blood to just plummet.
Wait, so their blood actually becomes more acidic while they run?
Dramatically so. It triggers a state of severe metabolic acidosis. The biochemical machinery of their cells literally begins to shut down under the acidic load.
Oh, wow.
This means they exhaust themselves on a chemical level in a matter of seconds. They don't stop running because they decided to. They stop because their muscles physically seize up and fail.
That completely reframes the classic spider in the bathroom scenario.
A cup scenario.
Yeah. When you try to catch a spider with a cup, and it darts a few feet and then suddenly freezes right out in the open.
Right.
It's not pausing to plot its next tactical maneuver. It is biochemically paralyzed.
Yeah.
It's sitting there in massive oxygen debt, waiting for its blood pH to return to normal.
Exactly. And clearing that lactic acid requires oxygen. So during that resting phase, their respiration rate spikes. They pant, essentially, though not with lungs like ours.
And they aren't burning fat for that sprint, right?
No, crucially, they do not burn fat during their intense sprints. Fat is only burned during these prolonged, quiet resting periods to power the recovery process.
This means their entire hunting strategy has to revolve around doing absolutely nothing for long periods of time.
Right, they are obligate ambush predators.
But if you have to sit perfectly still for hours while your blood recovers,
Hmm.
you can't be easily seen. Which brings us to the materials they use to hide themselves. Their skeleton and their colors.
Yeah, the camouflage is incredible.
I knew about the exoskeleton, obviously, the outer shell. But the research points out they also have an endoskeleton, which feels like a contradiction for a bug.
It is a common misconception that arthropods are just empty shells filled with goo.
That's totally what I thought.
Most people do. But the physical leverage required to move heavy limbs at explosive speeds requires internal anchor points. Spiders have two types of internal skeletal structures.
Okay, that's the first one.
First, they have apodemes. These are literally sections of the hard outer exoskeleton that have folded and grown inward, plunging deep into the body cavity.
Like inward spikes.
Sort of, yeah. For instance, there's a massive apodeme dropping down from the roof of their head shell to anchor the incredibly strong muscles of their sucking stomach.
So the outside shell pushes inward to create scaffolding.
Precisely. But they also have true internal cartilaginous structures called entosterna.
Cartilage, like we have.
Similar function, yes. These are suspended in the middle of the prosoma and don't connect to the outer shell at all. They act as central hubs for muscle attachment.
Oh, so the muscles don't just pull on the walls of the shell.
Right. It allows the muscles that operate the legs to pull against a firm internal center rather than just pulling against the opposite wall of the shell, which could warp it.
That is wild. And the outside of that shell is painted in some incredibly complex colors to maintain their camouflage. But the way they generate those colors isn't just a simple dye job, is it?
No. Pigmentation in spiders is a fascinating example of evolutionary recycling. Producing complex color molecules from scratch takes a lot of energy. So, spiders often repurpose their own metabolic waste.
They paint themselves with trash.
Basically, the typical yellows, oranges, reds, and browns you see on a spider are produced by pigments called homochromes. These are literally the chemical derivatives of tryptophan metabolism.
Tryptophan, like in turkey.
Exactly. When the spider breaks down proteins, it takes the tryptophan waste, alters it slightly, and deposits it in the skin as pigment. The brilliant greens of some crab spiders come from biliverdin, which is a toxic bile pigment they carefully isolate.
And what about the white colors? Like the bright white cross on a garden spider.
The white isn't actually a pigment at all. It is a structural trick. A major waste product of spider protein digestion is guanine. It's highly nitrogenous and potentially toxic.
Like guano.
Yes, related to that. Instead of excreting all of it, the spider crystallizes the guanine and stores it in specialized peripheral gut cells right beneath the transparent cuticle layer of the skin. These cells are called guanocytes.
So they literally pave the inside of their skin with crystals of their own waste.
Yes. And because those tiny guanine crystals are highly reflective, they bounce all incoming light back out. To our eyes, that broad spectrum reflection appears as a bright, matte white.
But the research makes a point to say that even though they are recycling waste, manufacturing and placing these specific color patterns is metabolically very expensive.
It is a huge drain on their resources.
If they are already operating on such a tight energy budget with their sprinting, why spend calories on a paint job?
Because the alternative is death. It's an evolutionary arms race against sight-hunting predators, particularly birds and certain species of parasitic wasps.
Because birds have crazy good vision.
A bird's vision is spectacular. If a spider sitting on a piece of tree bark is even slightly off color, the bird spots it and the spider is eaten. So the intense, constant pressure of predation forces the spider to pay that heavy metabolic tax.
I have no choice.
Exactly. They must maintain their camouflage no matter the energy cost, simply to exist in a world where things are looking for them.
Okay, so let's follow the energy. We have this heavily armored, beautifully camouflaged tractor trailer of a body. It burns explosive amounts of anaerobic fuel to move, and it spends a fortune on structural camouflage. How do you fuel that machine?
Very carefully.
Right? If you can't chase down food all day without going into metabolic acidosis, you have to extract absolutely every single calorie from the rare meal you do catch. Which brings us back to that visceral horror movie mechanism we started the deep dive with, external digestion.
The spider solves the problem of energy efficiency by outsourcing the heaviest mechanical work of eating.
Chewing.
Right. Mammals spend a massive amount of energy chewing. We grow heavy, dense teeth, massive jawbones, and powerful chewing muscles. We carry all that weight around constantly. Spiders bypass this entirely.
Yeah. When a spider catches a fly, it doesn't chew it into a paste. I mean, sometimes it uses its fangs, the chelicerae, to mash it up a bit, but often it just punctures a tiny hole.
Just a little injection site.
And then it regurgitates a flood of digestive enzymes from its own intestinal tract straight into the victim's body. It essentially uses the insect's own exoskeleton as a temporary mixing bowl.
The chemistry of those enzymes is incredibly potent. They're designed to rapidly break down proteins and soft tissues, liquefying the insect's internal organs into a nutrient-dense fluid.
A bug smoothie.
Exactly. The spider then uses a powerful muscular sucking stomach inside its prosoma to pump that liquid back into its own body.
But here is the mechanical nightmare that must create. An insect is not a clean, pure liquid. It is full of rigid, indigestible garbage.
Shards of chitin, tiny bristles, scales, hooks.
Yeah, if a spider is using a vacuum pump to suck up that soup, and a hard shard of beetle shell gets sucked into its narrow, delicate intestinal tract, it would tear the gut wide open. How do they not die of internal bleeding every time they eat?
They employ a filtration system of almost unimaginable precision. As the liquid is sucked into the mouth, it passes through the pharynx. The upper surface of this pharynx is a structure called the rostral plate.
Okay.
And this plate is covered in thousands of microscopic cuticular platelets that overlap each other perfectly like shingles on a roof.
And the scale of these shingles is what's truly mind-bending. The gaps between them block any solid particle larger than 1 micrometer.
It is incredibly fine.
To give the listener some context, a single strand of human hair is roughly 70 to 100 micrometers thick. So this filter in the spider's throat would catch a piece of dust 70 times smaller than the width of your hair.
To prove just how flawlessly this works, biologists conducted a beautiful experiment back in 1930, the Bartels experiment.
Oh, the India ink one.
Yes. They took a hungry spider and fed it a specialized solution. A neutral red fluid heavily mixed with suspended solid particles of black India ink. The ink particles were microscopic but solidly black.
They basically fed it a toxic printer cartridge.
Effectively, yeah. After the spider drank the fluid, the scientists dissected the spider's gut. They found that the entire digestive tract had turned bright red, proving that the spider successfully ingested the fluid. But they found virtually 0 particles of black India ink inside the stomach.
The filter caught all the ink. But wait, if the filter is that fine and it's trapping thousands of solid ink particles or tiny bits of insect shell, why doesn't it just clog up instantly?
That's the logical question.
Yeah, I mean, if I pour muddy water through a coffee filter, after 10 seconds, the mud seals the pores and the water stops dripping.
That is where the active cleaning mechanism comes in. The spider doesn't just suck continuously, it pulsates, it drinks for a few moments, and then it actively reverses the muscular flow.
Pushing it back out.
Right. It initiates an antiperistaltic stream, pumping the fluid backward from the stomach up through the throat, washing back over the microscopic shingles from the inside out.
It flushes the system.
Yes. By backwashing the filter, it dislodges all the accumulated solid waste. In a variation of that same experiment, using red carmine dye particles, researchers watched a spider drink the fluid.
And what happened?
About 30 minutes later, the spider engaged that reverse flow, clumped all the trapped dye particles together in its mouth, and pushed out a perfectly dry, solid little pellet of red waste.
Just spit it out.
It just casually brushed the pellet away with its front appendages, the pedipalps, and went back to drinking.
It's an infinitely reusable, self-cleaning biological microfilter.
It really is.
And once that perfectly pure liquefied nutrient shake finally makes it past the filter and into the stomach, we encounter another bizarre anatomical hack: the storage system. Because again, they might not catch another fly for a month. They need to store the calories, but they don't have a giant liver or massive fat deposits like we do.
Instead, they have fundamentally redesigned their midgut. In a mammal, the intestine is essentially a long, winding tube. In a spider, the midgut is heavily branched.
Branch like a tree.
Yes, it possesses these sprawling extensions called diverticula, and these branches don't just stay in the abdomen, they extend everywhere. They wrap around the spider's silk glands, they intertwine with the reproductive tracts, filling almost every available millimeter of empty space in the back half of the body.
And the research notes that in certain families, like jumping spiders, the stomach doesn't even stay in the back half.
No, it doesn't.
The diverticula actually tunnel their way through that tiny pedicel stalk we talked about enter the front half of the body, and push their way up into the spider's head, right into the spaces between their eyes.
They are maximizing volume. Every available crevice of their body cavity is utilized to store nutrient fluid. And this extensive decentralized storage network is the biological key to their patience. It is what allows them to outweight famine.
The numbers on this are staggering. The textbook cites an experiment where adult black widows were completely denied food, 0 calories, and they survived for up to 200 days.
Almost 7 months.
Yeah. Well-nourished tarantulas routinely go 6, 7, 8 months without eating a single thing.
When you combine a very low resting metabolic rate with a body that is essentially 80% stomach branches filled with dense liquid calories, you have created the ultimate patient predator.
They just wait.
They can sit in a crevice, drop their heart rate, stop moving, and just exist, burning microscopic fractions of a calorie per day, waiting for the season to change.
But waiting for 6 months introduces a new problem, which is dehydration. If you're sitting in a dry garage for half a year, you are slowly losing moisture to the air.
Yes, desiccation is a real threat.
And you definitely can't afford to lose water when you process waste.
Yeah.
So how do they handle excretion without drying out?
This is where we see incredibly elegant chemical engineering. Mammals excrete nitrogenous waste primarily as urea, dissolved in a large amount of water, which is urine. Spiders cannot afford to flush water away like that.
Right.
Instead, their primary excretory organs, called Malpighian tubules, process the waste from the hemolymph and convert the toxic nitrogen into compounds like guanine, adenine, and uric acid.
And the key to those specific chemicals is that they don't dissolve easily in water, right?
Exactly. They are highly insoluble. As the waste moves through the spider's hindgut, the surrounding tissues actively pump the water out of the waste and back into the spider's bloodstream.
Reclaiming it?
Yes. Because the guanine is insoluble, it precipitates out of the liquid and forms solid crystals. By the time the waste is ready to be excreted from the body, almost 100% of the water has been reclaimed. The spider excretes a nearly dry white paste.
And the research mentions they also have these strange things called nephrocytes scattered around their bodies to help with waste. What are those?
Yes, nephrocytes are an auxiliary system. They are massive, specialized cells up to 80 micrometers across, which is huge for a spider cell.
Okay.
They tend to cluster in the prosoma. Unlike the Malpighian tubules that process and expel waste, the nephrocytes act more like permanent microscopic garbage dumps.
They don't expel it.
No, they absorb large, complex metabolic byproducts straight from the bloodstream and just sequester them intracellularly. They hold on to the trash so it doesn't poison the spider, keeping the blood clean during those long fasting periods.
Okay, so we've solved food storage and we've solved water loss.
Yeah.
But they still have to breathe. And again, having your entire abdomen stuffed full of stomach branches, silk glands, and hundreds of eggs doesn't leave a lot of room for massive expanding lungs like a mammal has. So how do they get oxygen into their acidic blood?
They rely on 2 totally different respiratory systems and often use both simultaneously.
Chew system.
Yeah. The most ancient system is the book lungs. These are located on the underside of the abdomen. And the name is perfectly descriptive. Imagine a hollow cavity inside the spider. And inside that cavity is a stack of dozens of incredibly thin, hollow, cuticular leaves, layered right on top of each other, just like the pages of a book.
And the mechanics of it. Does the spider heave its abdomen to suck air in?
It requires very little active pumping, actually. The spider's hemolymph flows inside those hollow pages, while atmospheric air freely circulates in the narrow spaces between the pages.
Oh, so the air just drifts in.
Exactly. The cuticular membrane of the page is so microscopically thin that oxygen from the air naturally diffuses across the barrier and binds to hemocyanin, the copper-based oxygen carrier in their blood. The entire design is just a way to pack the absolute maximum amount of surface area into the smallest possible volume.
But book lungs are heavy and ancient. The research points out that as spiders evolved to become faster, more active hunters, they developed a second system to supplement the lungs, right? The tubular trachea.
Yes. Tracheae are essentially a network of tiny pipes that open to the outside air via a small slit, usually near the spinnerets.
Yeah.
These pipes branch out and travel directly through the body tissues, delivering oxygen directly to the organs that need it without relying solely on the blood to transport it.
Wait, they bypass the blood entirely.
In some cases, yes. In some highly active species, like jumping spiders, these breathing tubes branch so aggressively they tunnel right through the pedicel and go all the way down into the tips of their legs.
They have air pipes in their toes.
It ensures that those fast-twitch, hydraulically operated legs get oxygen as quickly as possible during recovery.
Now, speaking of breathing,
Mm-hmm.
there was one spider discussed in the research that completely hijacked this terrestrial lung system and did something that seems physically impossible. The water spider.
Ah, Artiorineta aquatica.
Yes. It is a spider with book lungs and trachea, meaning it has to breathe atmospheric air. But it lives its entire life, hunting, mating, laying eggs, completely underwater.
It is a phenomenal behavioral adaptation that exploits the physics of water. Argyroneta aquatica doesn't have gills. To survive, it constructs a literal diving bell.
A diving bell out of silk.
Yes. The spider swims down into a pond and spins a dense, tightly woven silken canopy between the stems of aquatic plants.
But the canopy is flat. How does it get air into it?
The spider swims up to the surface of the pond. Its abdomen and legs are covered in specialized, highly dense, hydrophobic, water-repelling hairs. When it breaks the surface and then dives back down, those hairs trap a layer of atmospheric air against its body.
Like a shiny suit.
It looks exactly like it's encased in a shimmering silver bubble. It swims down to the silken canopy, positions its abdomen underneath, and uses its hind legs to physically brush the air bubble off its body. The bubble floats up and gets caught under the silk.
And it just repeats this over and over, ferrying tiny armfuls of air down from the surface until the silk dome balloons out into a pressurized underwater base.
Exactly. It creates a dry, oxygenated pocket where it can sit, eat the aquatic insects it catches, and safely undergo its molting process. But here's the most brilliant part. It doesn't have to constantly resurface to refill the bell.
Why not? Doesn't it run out of air?
The bell acts as a reverse lung.
Wait, what does that mean? A reverse lung?
Think about the physics of dissolved gases. As the spider sits inside the bubble and breathes, it consumes oxygen, and the partial pressure of oxygen inside the bubble drops.
Okay, I'm with you.
But the surrounding pond water contains dissolved oxygen. Because the oxygen pressure inside the bubble is now lower than the pressure in the water, physics demands equilibrium. Oxygen naturally diffuses out of the water, across the boundary of the bubble, and into the bell, constantly replenishing the spider's air supply.
That is unbelievable. It built a semi-permeable membrane out of silk and surface tension to suck oxygen out of a pond.
It proves that the foundational spider blueprint, silk production, and air breathing is flexible enough to conquer environments it was never initially designed for.
And that reliance on silk provides the perfect pivot to how they actually capture the fuel to power all of this biology. Because we've established that spiders are sprinters. They exhaust quickly. If you can't chase your prey across a field, you have to force the prey to come to you. You have to build a trap. And the most famous trap in the natural world is the orb web.
The classic geometric bicycle wheel shape. When you actually look at the material science and the behavioral algorithm required to build one, it is a marvel of evolutionary engineering.
The sheer economy of it is what shocked me. I always assumed spinning a massive web in the garden took all night and emptied the spider's energy reserves. But the textbook states that a typical orb web only contains between 0.1 and 0.5 milligrams of silk. That is practically nothing.
Incredibly lightweight.
And it only takes them about 30 to 60 minutes of labor.
The efficiency is vital, but the engineering challenge they face is immense. To build a circular web suspended in midair, you first need a horizontal bridge line. If a spider is sitting on a branch and it wants to attach a thread to another tree 3 feet away, it faces a physical dilemma. It cannot fly, it cannot jump 3 feet with a line, so how does it cross the gap?
Right. It's like a human standing on the edge of a canyon with a spool of rope, trying to get the rope to the other side without throwing it.
The spider solves it by using fluid dynamics. It climbs to an elevated point, lifts its abdomen into the air, and extrudes a specialized, incredibly lightweight thread of silk from its spinnerets. It doesn't push the silk, it lets the ambient air currents pull it.
Oh, wow.
The spider is essentially fly fishing the wind. It pays out the line until the sticky end of the thread randomly blows across the gap and snags on a distant twig or leaf.
It just hopes it hits something. But once it feels that tension, it pulls the line taut.
Yes, but that first line is fragile, so the spider carefully walks out across this perilous microscopic tightrope. As it walks, it continuously reels out a brand new, much thicker, structurally sound thread behind it.
Oh, reinforcing it.
At the same time, it eats or spools up the fragile starter thread. By the time it reaches the other side, it has replaced the flimsy draft line with a heavy-duty, high-tension bridge.
Okay, so you have single tight rope spanning the gap. How do you get a circle out of that?
The spider walks back to the exact center of the bridge. It anchors a new thread there, and then it simply drops straight down to the ground or a lower branch, spinning a line as it falls.
The weight of the falling spider pulls the horizontal bridge down in the middle.
Exactly. The bridge sags, and what was a straight line becomes a massive Y shape. That intersection point of the Y becomes the central hub of the entire web.
And from there?
From there, the behavioral algorithm takes over. It constructs a rigid outer frame, lays down the radial threads connecting the hub to the frame like the spokes of a wheel, and finally spirals outward, laying down the specialized glue-covered capture silk.
It's architectural perfection. But the physics of the web go far beyond just being a sticky net. The research emphasizes that we have to fundamentally rethink what a web is. It is not just a passive piece of furniture the spider sits on.
No, the web is literally a physical extension of the spider's central nervous system.
That sounds crazy, but it's true.
It is. When the spider completes the web, it sits precisely in the center hub. It spreads its 8 legs out, resting the tips of its claws delicately on the radial threads. Because those threads are pulled incredibly taut, they act like acoustic guitar strings. They transmit longitudinal vibrations flawlessly across the entire structure.
And the sensors on the spider's legs are mind-boggling. The text mentions they have these microscopic structures cut into their exoskeleton called slit sensilla.
Yes.
They're literal mechanical strain gauges. As the vibration from a struggling fly travels up the silk string, it physically compresses the hard exoskeleton of the spider's leg by fractions of a nanometer.
It's impossibly sensitive.
The slit sensilla measure that microscopic compression and translate it into a neurological signal. They can detect an insect landing on the web that weighs as little as 0.1 milligrams.
They are performing real-time frequency analysis. Different events create different vibrations. A leaf falling into the web creates a low-frequency, high-amplitude thud. The spider ignores it.
It knows it's not food.
Right. But a buzzing fly, beating its wings furiously against the sticky silk, generates a high-frequency vibration, usually around 100 to 150 hertz.
So it feels the 100 hertz vibration and just sprints toward it.
Not blindly, it has to pinpoint the location. When it feels the initial vibration, the spider will often vigorously pluck the radial threads with its front legs, sending its own wave out into the web.
Like sonar.
Exactly like sonar. It is actively pinging the environment. By feeling how the return wave has been altered by the weight of the struggling insect, it instantly calculates the precise radial thread that leads directly to the meal. It is operating a biological radar dish.
And if you think using a web as a radar dish is wild, wait until we look at the triangle spider, Hyptiotes. Because this spider decided that a passive sticky net wasn't violent enough. It essentially weaponized the web into a loaded spring trap.
Hyptiotes represents an evolutionary divergence. It doesn't build a full circular orb web. It builds a triangle, just 3 sections of web that funnel down to a single point.
Okay.
And from that single point, there is a solitary mooring thread that attaches to a sturdy twig.
But here's the crazy part. The spider doesn't actually tie the mooring thread to the twig. The spider is the knot.
Yes. The spider holds the tensioned web line with its front legs, and it holds the twig with its back legs. It uses its own body to bridge the gap. It hauls backward, pulling the web absolutely taut. It pulls its own body into a state of extreme mechanical tension, storing massive amounts of elastic potential energy in the silk and in its own legs.
It just hangs there, completely flexed, acting as a living anchor pin, waiting for something to fly by.
And when an insect brushes against the loose cross threads of the triangle, Hyptiotes instantly lets go of the tension with its back legs. It releases a few loops of slack it was holding.
And then snap.
The immense stored potential energy is unleashed in a fraction of a second. The entire triangular web violently snaps forward, collapsing around the insect and instantly tangling it in a chaotic mess of sticky silk.
Now, I always assume that if a spider collapses its entire web like that, the trap is ruined. It's a single-use weapon, right?
That was a long-held myth. But high-speed observation proved it wrong. If the prey is small, the spider will wrap it up, cut it out of the web, and then simply walk backward, pull the web taut again, and reset the trap using the exact same silk framework. It is incredibly energy efficient.
That efficiency is vital if you are an ambush predator. But the research points out that not all spiders are content to sit and wait. Millions of years ago, certain lineages evolved to take the hunt on the road. And transitioning from a web builder to a free-roaming active hunter requires an entirely new set of sensory and locomotive tools.
To hunt actively, you first have to disperse and find a hunting ground. And this is where we see a behavior that borders on magic: ballooning.
If you've ever been outside on a crisp autumn morning and seen thousands of tiny, shimmering silver threads drifting through the sky, those aren't just stray cobwebs blowing in the wind. Those are tiny spiders actively flying.
It is their primary method of global dispersal. A juvenile spider climbs to the highest point it can find, a fence post, a blade of grass. It stands on its tiptoes, points its abdomen straight up at the sky, and extrudes a fan of incredibly fine silk threads. Now, scientists debated the physics of this for decades. Is it just catching the wind like a sail?
Right, because if it's just wind, they would just blow sideways into the next bush. But they go up, they get lifted straight up into the clouds.
Exactly. It turns out they are exploiting not just thermal updrafts, but atmospheric electrostatic forces.
Like static electricity.
Precisely. The Earth's surface has a negative charge, and the upper atmosphere has a positive charge. The spider silk threads pick up negative charge as they are extruded. Because like charges repel, the negatively charged silk is pushed away from the negatively charged ground, generating upward lift.
That is insane.
When the combined forces of the updraft and the electrostatic repulsion exceed the weight of the spider, it releases its grip on the grass and shoots into the sky. They can travel for thousands of miles this way. They are literally aeronauts.
Which explains why, when a volcano erupts in the middle of the ocean and creates a brand new, sterile island of hardened lava, spiders are almost always the very first terrestrial predators to arrive. They just drop out of the stratosphere.
Yep, they just rain down.
But once they land, the active hunting begins. And the way they decode their environment without a web is astonishing. Let's look at the fishing spider, Dolomedes. It doesn't hunt in the grass, it hunts on the surface of ponds.
It replaces the silk web with the surface tension of water. Water is a superb conductor of vibration. Dolomedes rests its front legs lightly on the meniscus of the water, utilizing those same microscopic slit sensilla strain gauges we discussed earlier.
But I'm trying to picture this. A pond is incredibly noisy. The wind is blowing, causing ripples. Frogs are jumping. How does the spider tell the difference between a gust of wind and a juicy moth that just fell in?
It is a masterclass in biological signal processing. The nervous system of Dolomedes filters out low frequencies. The wind blowing across a pond generates rolling ripples. Those waves have a low frequency, maybe 1 to 10 hertz, and a high amplitude, meaning the wave is physically tall.
Right.
The spider's brain essentially sets a noise gate. It completely ignores anything under 10 hertz. It just rides the waves like a cork.
It filters out the ocean swell.
But when a moth falls onto the surface and panics, it beats its wings furiously. That creates a highly chaotic, high-frequency wave, usually over 100 hertz, with a very small amplitude.
Fast, tiny ripples.
The moment those fast, tiny ripples hit the spider's legs, the nervous system triggers an immediate, aggressive strike response. It runs across the surface of the water and attacks.
And while the fishing spider uses water as its radar, the jumping spiders, the Salticidae, took a completely different evolutionary path. They abandoned vibration almost entirely and went all in on vision, which requires explaining those massive, adorable eyes they have on the front of their heads.
Jumping spiders have fundamentally altered the sensory blueprint. Most spiders are essentially blind. They perceive changes in light and shadow, but they hunt entirely by touch and vibration. You can blindfold a wandering spider, and if a fly walks past its leg, it will catch it instantly.
But if you put a dead fly in front of it,
If you put a dead, motionless fly in front of a vibration hunter, it will starve to death because it can't feel it.
a jumping spider, however, would spot the dead fly from a foot away and calculate a jump.
Yes. Their primary massive front eyes operate like sophisticated telescopic cameras. They have a fixed corneal lens on the outside of their shell, but deep inside their head, at the back of the long eye tube, is a high-resolution retina. And the truly incredible part is that the retinas can physically move independently of the lenses.
Wait, their eyes don't move on the outside, but the inside of their eyes swivels around.
Exactly. Using 6 tiny muscles attached to the eye tube, the spider can pan, tilt, and rotate its retinas to scan the environment without moving its body or its head. They literally scan the horizon internally.
That sounds like a cyborg.
And that retina has 4 distinct tiers of light-sensitive cells, allowing them to see in high-definition color, including the ultraviolet spectrum.
So they spot the prey. They calculate the distance using the overlap of their multiple eye fields, and then they strike. And the mechanics of a spider strike are terrifying. Let's break down the timing. The research analyzed high-speed cinematography of a wandering spider, Cupienius, attacking a cockroach.
The 1,000 frames per second footage.
Yeah. Filming at 1,000 frames per second, they track the sequence. From the moment the spider initiates the attack to the moment the prey is subdued, the entire sequence takes less than 0.2 seconds. That is significantly faster than the blink of a human eye.
But the high-speed film revealed that it isn't just a blind, stereotyped lunge. It is a highly coordinated, adaptable sequence of physical intents.
Okay, let's walk through the 0.2-second sequence because the final step totally surprised me. Step 1. The spider lunges and grasps the prey with its front legs. It uses dense pads of microscopic adhesive hairs on its feet, called scopulae, to get an unbreakable power grip on the insect's shell.
Right.
Step 2. It violently yanks the struggling insect toward its body. Step 3. The massive fangs, the chelicerae, swing open, sink deep into the prey, and begin pumping venom. And then, Step 4. The spider completely lets go of the prey with all of its legs.
Which seems entirely counterintuitive. If you are a predator trying to subdue a desperately struggling animal, why would you release your grip?
Right. If I am wrestling a wildcat, I'm not going to bite it and then let go of its paws.
To understand why they let go, you have to look at their biomechanical weakness. A spider's legs are long and highly articulated. More importantly, they don't have extensor muscles to straighten their leg joints. They use hydraulic blood pressure to force the legs open.
So they are hydraulic pumps.
Exactly. This makes their legs incredibly fast, but structurally fragile against lateral forces. If a massive, powerful insect, like a heavily armored beetle, gets its 6 clawed feet on the ground, it can thrash wildly. That thrashing can easily snap the spider's delicate legs.
So it's a defensive move.
A brilliant one. By releasing its grip with its legs and standing up tall, the spider holds the massive prey aloft solely by its fangs. The prey is dangling in midair. Because the insect's feet can't touch the ground, it has absolutely zero leverage.
It can't push off anything.
Right. It cannot apply any directed force to fight back or damage the spider. The spider just holds it out at arm's length by its teeth until the venom shuts down the insect's nervous system.
It's biological jujitsu. Now, web builders have a totally different strategy for dealing with dangerous prey. If you are an orb weaver and a massive, highly venomous wasp crashes into your web, running out and biting it is a suicide mission.
The wasp will absolutely sting you in the face.
So they use the wrap first, bite later strategy.
Orb weavers will sprint out to the edge of the struggling wasp, but instead of biting, they turn their back on the prey. Using their highly agile hind legs, they pull thick, wide sheets of specialized swathing silk from their spinnerets and literally throw it over the wasp from a safe distance.
Like tossing a net.
They wrap it furiously, binding its wings and its stinger tight against its body. Only when the wasp is completely immobilized into a mummy does the spider finally lean in and deliver a short, calculated, venomous bite.
The research also notes this wrapping strategy solves a problem of abundance. What if a massive hatch of mayflies happens and 5 insects hit the web at the exact same time?
If the spider had to bite and wait for the venom to act on the first fly, the other 4 would struggle free and escape. The wrap-first strategy allows the spider to rapidly secure multiple victims in seconds.
So it just wraps and runs.
It runs out, swaths the first fly, leaves it alive but trapped in the web, and immediately sprints to the next one. It essentially stocks its pantry for the week in about 10 seconds.
So the spider is fully fueled. The hunt is over. What does this highly optimized machine do with all those extracted calories? It propagates the species, which brings us to reproduction. And spider reproduction relies on anatomical features that are so bizarre, evolutionary biologists actually use them to define and separate species. Let's start with the males.
The defining characteristic of a male spider is that they do not possess primary external copulatory organs on their abdomen like a mammal would. Instead, evolution took a pair of short leg-like appendages near their mouth, the pedipalps, and radically repurposed them.
The pedipalp.
Yes. In a mature male, the terminal segments of these palps swell up and transform into incredibly complex, bulbous, syringe-like structures.
So they have to manually load these syringes, right?
Yes. The male spins a tiny specialized web called a sperm web. He deposits a drop of seminal fluid from his abdomen onto the silk. Then he reaches under with his pedipalps and uses capillary action to suck the fluid up into the complex coiled tubes hidden inside the palpal bulbs.
Now he is armed, and he has to find a female.
And the female has an equally complex hardened cuticular plate on the underside of her abdomen called the epigynom. The textbook relies heavily on the classic lock and key analogy to explain this.
Okay, so the male is the key.
The male's complex palpal bulb is the key, and it is covered in rigid hooks, spurs, and twisted coils. The female's epigynom is the lock, filled with winding entry ducts and blind alleys. The physical shapes are so unbelievably intricate and unique that a scientist can identify the exact species of a spider just by looking at a drawing of these organs.
The traditional assumption in arachnology was that this physical lock and key mechanism was the primary barrier preventing hybridization. The theory was that if a male spider tried to mate with a female of a different, closely related species, the key simply wouldn't fit the lock, physically preventing crossbreeding.
But the research actually pushes back on that heavily. It says the physical mismatch isn't the real barrier.
What is?
The true barrier is behavioral. The physical lock and key is merely the final, redundant failsafe. The real test happens before he ever touches her. Consider the male's situation. He has to approach a much larger, highly aggressive, venomous female whose fundamental biological instinct is to instantly attack and eat anything that vibrates her web.
He wants to kill him.
Exactly. He has to convince her that he is a mate, not a meal.
Which means he has to announce himself.
Precisely. And he does this through species-specific courtship displays. If it's a web-building species, the male will carefully step onto the edge of her web and begin drumming on the silk with his pedipalps or plucking the threads in a very specific rhythmic cadence.
Like Morse code.
He is transmitting a precise mechanical frequency down the silk lines. If it's a visually oriented jumping spider, the male will stand in front of the female and perform an elaborate, highly choreographed, dance-waving, uniquely colored legs in specific geometric patterns.
And what happens if a male makes a mistake and wanders onto the web of a related but different species? Does he get eaten?
Usually he is just ignored or chased off before it escalates. The male might begin his rhythmic drumming, but the female's nervous system is hardwired to only become receptive to the exact frequency pattern of her own species.
So she just doesn't hear it as a mating call.
If the rhythm is even slightly off, she simply does not recognize it as a mating signal. The courtship instantly fails, so the behavioral lock is much tighter than the physical one.
So, assuming the dance is flawless, they mate, and the female prepares to lay her eggs. This forces us to look at where spiders actually live and how they manipulate their environment to protect those eggs. The text dives deeply into ecological stratification, the idea that spiders divide the world up into highly specific vertical layers to avoid competing with each other.
Layering the ecosystem.
Yeah, you have spiders that only live in leaf litter, spiders that only live in knee-high grass, and spiders that only exist in the canopy of trees.
And their sensitivity to the microclimates within those layers is astonishing. They are hyper-aware of temperature and humidity gradients that we don't even notice. A fantastic example detailed in the research is the wolf spider, Pirata piraticus. Wolf spiders don't build webs to hold their eggs. The mother carries the spherical egg sac physically attached to her spinnerets wherever she goes.
The ultimate helicopter parent.
Exactly. Now, Pirata lives in highly specific habitats, sphagnum moss bogs. The textbook provides a fascinating thermodynamic graph of this habitat. On a sunny summer afternoon, the surface of the moss bog is completely exposed to the sun. The temperature at the very top of the moss can spike to 39 degrees Celsius.
Which is roughly 102 degrees Fahrenheit. That would literally cook a sack of spider eggs into omelets.
It is lethal. However, during the night, that same exposed surface can drop to a freezing 8 degrees Celsius. So the surface is a hostile environment. But just 5 centimeters down, deep inside the wet, insulating layer of the moss, the temperature barely fluctuates.
Oh, just 5 centimeters.
It remains a constant, comfortable 20 degrees Celsius day and night.
So how does the spider utilize this?
The female Pirata constructs a vertical silken retreat tube that tunnels straight down from the surface into the deep, cool moss. She acts as a living, mobile thermostat for her unborn offspring.
How does she control the tent?
In the morning, when the sun is gentle and the surface is warm but not hot, she climbs up the tube and deliberately exposes the egg sac to the sun to accelerate the embryo's metabolic development. But the second the surface temperature exceeds safe limits, or when night falls and it gets too cold, she scrambles backward down the tube, dragging the eggs into the perfectly stable 20-degree sanctuary below.
That intensive, calculated level of maternal care ensures a very high survival rate for the spiderlings, which means there are an unimaginable number of spiders out there. And that brings us to their macroecological impact. The math presented in the research regarding their role as predators is legitimately staggering.
To understand their impact, you have to look at population density. There was an older calculation discussed in the text that tried to quantify their global consumption. If you take a conservative estimate of how many spiders exist on a single hectare of unmanaged land, about 2.5 acres, and multiply that by the tiny fractions of a gram each spider eats daily.
Okay, what's the number?
The resulting estimate suggested that the spiders on that single hectare consume 47,500 kilograms of insects every single year.
47,000 kilograms.
Yeah.
An average housefly weighs roughly 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom the millions of billions of insects that translates to. Now, the text does caveat that modern estimates, particularly in European agricultural zones, are more conservative, maybe ranging from 1 to 100 kilograms per hectare, depending on how degraded the habitat is. But the fundamental ecological truth holds. Spiders are the primary terrestrial buffer against insect explosions.
If you connect this to the fundamental laws of biology, insects reproduce on an exponential curve. A single pair of aphids, if left unchecked, can generate millions of descendants in a few months. Spiders prevent this. Because spiders blanket the ecosystem, they are in the soil, the grass, the bushes, the canopy. They exert constant, heavy predation pressure on every single stage of an insect's life cycle.
They eat them early.
During the early spring, when insect populations start to boom, the sheer density of hungry spiders dampens that exponential growth curve before it can spiral out of control.
Which makes modern agriculture a massive self-inflicted wound. The text explicitly warns that in modern monoculture farming, where we eradicate all the weeds, spray herbicides, and plow the fields constantly, we destroy the microclimates that spiders need to survive. The spider population crashes.
And by aggressively removing the primary, naturally occurring predators, we leave our crops entirely defenseless against the pests we are trying to kill. We are destroying the biological buffer that protects us.
So we desperately need these solitary, aggressive, cannibalistic little killers defending our farms. But just when you think you have spiders entirely figured out as these isolated, ruthless assassins, the research drops a massive behavioral curveball. This brings us to the ultimate plot twist in the textbook: social spiders.
It is the great anomaly of arachnology. We just spent this entire deep dive establishing that spiders are hyper-aggressive carnivores. They are hardwired to strike at anything that vibrates a web. Yet there are a handful of species worldwide that have completely subverted millions of years of solitary cannibalistic programming. The premier example is Agelena consociata, a funnel web spider from the tropical rainforests of Africa.
When we say social, we aren't talking about a mother tolerating her babies for a few weeks before they disperse. We are talking about massive, permanent colonies. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of adult spiders, all living together in a single, gigantic communal web that can drape over entire trees.
And it's unbelievable.
They construct the web together, they repair it together, and most shockingly, they hunt cooperatively and share the meat.
And we have to differentiate their society from the social insects we are familiar with. When we think of social cooperation, we think of ants or honeybees. But a beehive operates on a rigid biological caste system. You have one queen who is chemically dominant and is the only one who lays eggs. You have sterile female workers who forage and sterile soldiers who defend. It is a strict hierarchy driven by pheromones suppressing the reproduction of the masses.
But the social spider, Agelena consociata, doesn't do that.
No. There are no castes. There is no queen spider. Every single female in the communal web is fully sexually mature and capable of laying eggs. Any spider can spin silk to fix a hole in the roof, and any spider can participate in capturing prey. It is an egalitarian society of killers.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on the mechanics of this. We established that if a jumping spider or an orb weaver feels a vibration, its nervous system triggers an involuntary 0.2-second lethal strike. If you have 1,000 of these predators walking all over the exact same vibrating web, how does it not instantly devolve into a massive cannibalistic bloodbath the second one of them takes a step?
It requires a remarkable evolutionary behavioral override. They rely almost entirely on precise chemical and tactile recognition. The exoskeleton of Agelena consociata is coated in a very specific chemical signature, a cuticular hydrocarbon. When a social spider is running toward a vibration and accidentally bumps into another spider, their sensory hairs brush against each other.
They taste the shell.
Exactly. And that instantaneous chemical recognition immediately and completely overrides the predatory strike reflex. The aggression is instantly suppressed. They are just as fast and ruthless as a solitary spider when a grasshopper hits the web, but they are perfectly mutually tolerant of anyone carrying the colony's chemical password.
And the cooperative hunting is terrifyingly effective. The research describes how if a tiny gnat hits the edge of this massive colony web, one single spider will run out, bite it, and drag it back to the leafy retreat to eat. But if a massive insect hits the web, say a giant katydid or a heavy beetle that is 10 times larger than a single spider, they don't ignore it, they swarm.
The immense vibration triggers a mass response. Dozens of spiders rush out of the retreat simultaneously, and they don't just blindly attack, they seem to coordinate. Some spiders will bite the insect's legs and use their weight to pin it down, stretching it out. Others will climb onto its back to find a soft spot between the armor plates to deliver the venom.
They take down prey they could never kill alone.
And the evolutionary benefits of this group living are massive. Researchers tracking these colonies found that social spiders enjoy much faster growth rates because they get access to massive amounts of shared food. They suffer much lower mortality rates, partly because a massive communal web is much harder for a wasp to penetrate than a solitary web. They get all the benefits of a society, yet they remain fundamentally independent reproducing agents.
It proves that the fundamental spider blueprint isn't a dead end. It's incredibly flexible. And looking at how that blueprint changed brings us to the final major paradigm shift in the book, their deep history and phylogeny. Where did they come from and how did they evolve?
To understand their origins, we have to consult the fossil record, which, for soft-bodied arthropods, is understandably sparse. But there are crucial anchor points. For decades, the most famous fossil in arachnology was a specimen from the Devonian period, roughly 400 million years ago, named Attercopus.
400 million years ago. We are talking deep time, way before the first dinosaur, before trees even looked like trees.
Yes, an unrecognizable Earth. For a long time, Attercopus was hailed in textbooks as the oldest known spider. It had 8 legs, and crucially, it had organs capable of producing silk.
But paleontology is constantly rewriting itself.
Right. High-resolution imaging eventually revealed that while Attercopus produced silk, it completely lacked true spinnerets. Spinnerets are highly articulated, muscular nozzles that allow modern spiders to control the thickness and tension of the silk, which is required for building complex webs. Attercopus just oozed silk out of simple pores on its belly. It was an arachnid, a close cousin, but not a true spider. To find the true ancestors, we move forward to the Carboniferous period, roughly 300 million years ago, and look at the Mesoceli.
And the wildest part is that the Mesoceli didn't go extinct. They still exist right now, hiding in caves in Southeast Asia. They are literal living fossils. And they look so strange because they clearly still have segmented abdomens. You can see the armor plates on their back half, proving they evolved from heavily segmented ancestors before all those plates fused into the smooth, sac-like abdomen of modern spiders.
Exactly. They are the evolutionary bridge. But the path from those ancient ground-dwelling trapdoor spiders to the massive diversity we see today contains a twist that upended biological assumptions. For a long time, there was a deep-seated bias in evolutionary thought that organisms always progress from simple behaviors to highly complex behaviors.
Right, the ladder of progress.
So the classic assumption was that spiders started as primitive, simple running hunters on the ground. Over millions of years, they slowly evolved the ability to string a few lines of silk together. And eventually, this culminated in the evolutionary pinnacle, the mind-boggling geometric perfection of the aerial orb web. The web was assumed to be the ultimate final stage of spider evolution.
The ultimate technological achievement. But the modern molecular data and the cladograms, the family trees, prove that is completely backwards.
It is entirely inverted. When you look at the genetic timelines, the highly active, visually complex, free-roaming hunting spiders like the jumping spiders and the crab spiders evolved much later. They mostly radiated during the Tertiary period, long after orb webs were dominating the forests.
So the web wasn't the end of the line.
Not at all. The evolutionary trajectory went from primitive, messy ground webs to the elegant perfection of the aerial orb web. And then, the twist. Certain lineages of web-building spiders became so neurologically advanced, developing such incredibly fast hydraulic legs, such sophisticated venom, and such high-resolution visual processing, that they essentially outgrew their own technology. They abandoned the web entirely.
They realized they didn't need the trap anymore. They took the advanced sensory tech on the road.
The free-roaming active hunters we see today are actually the highly evolved descendants of stationary web-building ancestors. They evolved past the absolute need for a built environment.
That is just incredible. They mastered architecture, perfected the ultimate house, and then decided they were strong enough to live without it. We have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of biological ground today. We started by looking at a two-part armored chassis that burns anaerobic fuel so fast it chemically paralyzes itself. We explored an external digestive system that relies on a microscopic, self-cleaning physical filter in the throat to process pure liquid calories. We saw how they fly-cast silken bridges into the wind to build acoustic radar nets, and how jumping spiders abandon those nets to tackle prey in midair with a 0.2-second mechanically genius strike. And we ended with hundreds of killers peacefully cooperating in an African rainforest, and a family tree that proved complex technology was just a stepping stone to complete independence.
When you lay it all out like that, it is a profound demonstration of the sheer power of adaptation. They took a very specific, somewhat limited anatomical blueprint, a rigid box attached to a soft sac, and biochemically and behaviorally tweaked it over 300 million years to survive mass extinctions, global climate shifts, and completely new ecosystems.
Which brings up a final thought I want to leave the listener with, building specifically on that evolutionary trajectory. The expert and I were discussing this offline before we hit record. Spiders spent tens of millions of years perfecting a built external environment, the web, in order to capture resources and survive. But eventually, their internal cognitive and sensory systems advanced so much that entire lineages walked away from the webs they built. They became free-roaming, independent agents. Consider human evolution in our current century. We are becoming increasingly, almost totally dependent on our built technological webs. Our electrical grids, our data networks, our algorithmic infrastructure. We cannot survive without the web we built. Are we moving toward a future where we are permanently biologically bound to our technology? Or will we, like the jumping spider, eventually evolve the internal capacity to step away from the web entirely and carry that complexity within ourselves? It is something to seriously mull over.
It is the ultimate question of adaptation. Does biological success look like permanently mastering your external environment, or eventually outgrowing your need for it entirely?
Exactly. So the next time you see a spider freezing on your bathroom wall, remember that 1800s Japanese silk painting. Don't look at it like the terrified, ignorant artist of the 1491 woodcut. Look closely. Adopt that feline curiosity. You aren't just looking at a creepy bug. You're looking at hundreds of millions of years of perfectly calculated, highly adaptable, and undeniably magnificent biological engineering. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay insanely curious.